Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Climate Emergency Centre webinar. We have, for your delight and delectation, a great thinker, philosopher, and author and elder of our scene and our movement of movements. He's been active since the late 60s from the macrobiotic movement and restaurants he ran that John and Yoko Ono came into, right through to inventing the veggie burger, author of The State is Out of Date, and also the SUN, Son of God. He's a very deep thinker, and he's been the tip of great thinking for our movement for many years. So without too much further ado, we love Greg, veteran of the M11 and the old road protests. Over to you, Greg. Thank you very much for coming. 33 in the house to hear you so far, and more rising. So over to you, Greg. If you want to share your slides and do a quick intro. Over. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for having me, Phoenix. I'm going to start off mentioning an event that you and I went to, because the title of this is Changing the Culture. And you and I I was speaking at a conference for the Psychedelic Society in the UK a few years ago. And it's mainly young, under 30 type of psychedelic devotees. And the title was, what they wanted me to talk about was whether or not psychedelics have been beneficial or detrimental in the 60s, because some people put it about that because of Timothy Leary and everybody having fun with them, it screwed the proper psychiatric research that was being done, people getting off alcoholism really quickly, and so on and so forth, which I thought was it was an interesting angle on it. But then I pointed out to them that imagine you're a crowd of a couple hundred people there in the mid 60s. And I asked you, do you know any, put up your hand if you know a yoga teacher, or put up your hand if you know what acupuncture is, or have you ever meditated? Do you know what a mantra is? Do you know what acupuncture is? Have you met a vegan? Nobody would be putting their hand up. I mean, maybe one or two people, but it was unthinkable. So the world has changed enormously. I mean, they wouldn't have heard of tea tree oil or spirulina, even brown rice, let alone miso or tahini. It was a complete blank in those days. So the culture has changed enormously, and in many positive ways. And this is something we always should hold in balance and remind ourselves of when we see how the negative side, the nuclear proliferation and state desire to control us and increasing taxation and government scandals and all that crap. Give a thought to all the positive changes that have come along in the course of that. It was very, very gray in the 60s. People wore, some of us remember, all short hair. It was 9 to 5. That was what everybody aspired to, get a nice 9 to 5 job, maybe 8 to 5 if you were a laborer. And you had blue collar, white collar. If you worked in an office, white collar, blue collar, if you labored. And there was only one drug, and that was alcohol. You can count tobacco as a drug, but it's addictive. It doesn't do anything for you. So that was a big change, and something we really should appreciate. And all of those of us who took a part in it can take credit for. So I'm going to switch over now to a few images. There we go. You can see how I was there. First images. This is just some of us at the table having a macrobiotic meal in 1967. This probably would have been. And it's just there's me in the left and my brother in the right front corner, my former wife, Sandy, right in the front. And that was a very extraordinary event in that day. My brother Craig had been inspired into macrobiotics at a restaurant in New York, the Paradox Restaurant. And he came over when I was in university in America. He came over to England. He opened up a little restaurant in Notting Hill Gate, in a basement. I'd meanwhile come back from university because I'd broken my back, unfortunately, and was in a wheelchair at that point. Um, but his restaurant was only open for a few months. It made too much noise. It had to be shut down. And he was in the course of opening up a new one, which was nearing readiness, um, when unfortunately he had to leave the country suddenly. And as things transpired, I went in there a month or so later and opened this restaurant up. And it was seed restaurant, macrobiotic restaurant. Okay, this is the menu from the restaurant called Tomorrow's You. And it was, in today's money, 35p for the light special, 50p for the big meal. Big meal was a bean salad, combination of chickpeas, red beans, and gungo peas in a crisp and tangy salad with whole oat groats. That was the grain of the day. Brown rice tempura. I'm not quite sure. It's deep fried brown rice and batter. And the carrot sesame seed salad and apple cake. And if you couldn't afford 35p, you could have a free meal, which was rice and vegetables and a cup of tea. Um, and there are not many photos of the restaurant, but there's one of me in there with a typical meal in front of me and something very reminiscent of fractals I got into years later, which is a mandala painting by Larry Smart. Um, my brother has a collection of his art. Um, I put a magazine together to enlighten people a little bit about the nature of food and yin and yang and these kind of very new concepts about diet and health. And I put this together while I was running the restaurant. I had 3 editions of it. As Phoenix said, John and Yoko were regular customers, and John said, can I do anything for that, for your magazine? I said, sure. And he produced this little cartoon for me, a big cartoon actually. I don't know if you
Wow.
read it on your screen, but it says, so I was vegetarian, so I was slow. So I read this book, which was an early book on macrobiotics. So I went to Greg's. So I did 10 days rice. Well, that wasn't at Greg's, he ate that rice, but so that was a 10-day rice diet to cure everything. So I was fast. He's a bit slimmer in that picture. Then Harmony, so I read this, my magazine. Hi, Greg. So we all need harmony. So that was a lovely tribute from John to the place in the magazine. What do we got next here? Okay, people needed to eat this food um, at the restaurant, and we'd have to go to 4 or 5 different places to find the ingredients at ethnic stores that were importing some of this stuff. Um, I opened up Ceres Grain Store in All Saints Road in 1969, England's first natural food shop, and a posh-looking motor out in front of it there. Um, Craig came back into the business, and we moved Ceres to the Portobello Road. Um, that's inside Ceres. That's pumpkins that we had to get growing for us. Pam Donaldson, our first manageress. Um, that's on the Portobello Road, Ceres Grain Store. And Craig, when the Pioneer shop next to us went out of business, he opened up the first wholemeal bakery there. Nothing but whole grain products, nothing white, no sugar, no butter. Um, and they both did really well.
Greg, can I just check? Was it called Ceres after the
The, Gr-
goddess of agriculture, grain, crops, fertility,
the
and motherly
Greek goddess,
relationships?
the Greek goddess of grain, yeah, Ceres, Demeter
Brilliant.
was the Roman equivalent. Yeah, so for noticing that. My English teacher, who was very into the Greek myths in high school, was so chuffed when she found out I called the shop Ceres. Because the macrobiotics, we're into grain, into cereals as a basic food, so that had to be the name of it. Um, and oh, I'm not sure what slides come out there. We gotta keep going the wrong way. Okay, now then so we needed to. Other shops wanted to sell the food as well, and to get the sort of stuff we needed, we had to buy more than we could sell in one shop, and thus was born Harmony Foods. Um, that was our first little leaflet on some of the products we had, and organic brown rice was the first big product. It was really sold all over the country at a point when health food shops used to sell white rice if they sold rice at all. So that was the big product. Um, there's some of our early tahini and miso and tamari and buckwheat flour and brown rice, various beans, aduki beans and others. This was sort of basic things that had never seen shelves of anything outside of a obscure ethnic shop before. So that was the first Harmony Foods factory. When we moved that factory to Bermondsey because we needed more space, our offices were down here where it says pastries, bread, and cakes, and there was tons of stuff stored on the floor above us, which used to sag a bit. Anyway, that was the first big factory, and Craig opened up a wholesale bakery there where they were delivering wholemeal bread around London and other parts of the home counties. That was the first price list: rice, buckwheat flour, tamari, miso, sesame seeds, and umeboshi plums, and patchouli oil, the ever essential hippie fragrance there. Look at the prices. You get 20-kilo keg of miso for £8 and 50, I get £8 and 5 shillings. That was in those days. This is the four of us, me, my brother, Jay Landisman, and Joe Dickens, posing for the annual Christmas card. And there weren't many yin yang signs in London. Our company was Yin Yang Limited. There was a yin yang sign outside the restaurant. And I remember the rush I got in Park Lane once. I was driving along. I saw another yin yang sign. It was on a car. That was the Korean flag, a Korean ambassador's car. So we needed an organ to promote our stuff, get more information out beyond what I'd done with 3 Little Issues of Harmony magazine. And our father retired from Vietnam, and he had publishing experience. Let me get my throat here. So we put him to work publishing Seed magazine, which was the Journal of Organic Living. That went out for about 6 or 7 years, and lots of issues that are all laboriously on my brother's website, if you want to read how far ahead we were. And this was one of our favorite covers.
I love that one. Love it.
You can all relate to this. Yeah, to destroying the population in different manners. Of course, they don't have got the food pharmaceuticals weren't in that picture. And bulk price list for Harmony Foods. We've got a big thing on the front about protest. Back in those days, it was we're out against Windscale, nuclear power. So I had roots in protest, but I was too busy selling rice to get to many of these demos in those days. This was our crew at the first warehouse when we moved down to Bermondsey, had a big space down there, but then that all got destroyed by the inner London orbital route. There was a lovely neighborhood there, our factory there. We employed a lot of the local people in the packing rooms, and everything had to be leveled. And then they canceled the inner London orbital route. This is, politics and government. So we moved to a big factory when they destroyed this in Willesden. That's a Eat, Don't Drink, and Be Merry article in Fiesta magazine on macroeconomics, which was kind of tits and brown rice all together on that paper. And then this was the expanded crew at the factory in Willesden. And at this point, we'd gone from selling, packets of rice and beans and things to importing container loads, through the week, hundreds of tons of stuff coming in and out of this warehouse. It was that was the warehouse. You can see the size of it and the sacks, and we had forklift trucks and all these things that we used to dream of. But it was a really big, big enterprise. And in the food industry, you only get 1 or 2% net profit. You're hoping to, because you sell stuff over and over. You don't sell a chair and that's it, or a settee or a cooker. So you get low margins, and we were all in financial difficulty. We were in financial difficulties there, and I came up with a new product idea that I thought would solve our problems. And because it wouldn't need new overheads, it would be something that soon, once we'd established it, unlike brown rice and miso beans, somebody else couldn't put it in a packet and sell it for a couple p cheaper than us. And I think this is what I came up with was the veggie burger. And it was a far cry from all of this stuff. And we had investors and we had bankers and accountants all saying, "You're in deep shit, guys. What are you going to do?" And I said, "Hey, I've got this idea for a new product, which I think is going to be really good. It's veggie burger." And their thing was veggie burger, schmeggie burger. 90% of new products fail. There's no market for this. What are you talking about? Um, and I had faith in it. And looking back, I think it's because, all these tons and tons of stuff was going out. And I knew that a lot of the people who were buying this stuff weren't eating meat and that there would be a market for this. And I then ended up left the company in Craig's hands and went off with the veggie burger. And the article says after yogurt, muesli, and wholemeal bread, is it the turn of the veggie burger? And it was. Um, I got Sainsbury's agreed. I sent the Sainsbury's buyer a case. He took a packet home, tried it, liked it, and put it on sale in 8 of their shops. That's unheard of. Sainsbury's buyers, you got to bend over backwards and crawl at their feet to get to supermarket buyers. And it sold and it took off and it really established the fact there was a market for vegetarian foods. Now, one of the ways I promoted this, well, that's some of the publicity I got. I got lots of publicity for it because I got Gallup to do a survey. Gallup, the sort of the main organization at the time on changing attitudes to meat consumption. And I asked questions.
Oh,
The first time to ever find out how many vegetarians and vegans there were in the country, how many people were cutting back on red meat, how many people ate as much meat as they could. Um, and I think it's really exemplified the changing attitudes. You've got Frankfurter Queen with her tits hanging out, sitting on a pile of Frankfurters. That was the 50s. You could do that. And on the right, you've got this, lovely moo cow eyeing up a bull in her sunglasses, very anthropomorphic. And that it was news that there were vegetarians and like 16 to 24-year-old girls were leading the charge on it. And it got publicity, which was fantastic. I did Veggie Burger, and my brother years later um, came out with his wife with Green and Blacks, 70%, the first organic dark chocolate that you've ever seen, which was pretty commendable. Um, where are we? Okay, so that was Veggie Burger. Where are we going? It really, yeah, changed a lot of lives, and I left it after 7 years because it was getting to be. I mean, I ran it with out of my house. Everything was contracted out. I had one part-time assistant. Within about 18 months, I was turning over the same amount. I had done Harmony Foods with that massive warehouse a couple years earlier. Um, so, but once I started to have a sales manager and a bookkeeper and stuff like that, I said, "Okay, Greg, this is time to get out." And I got out of it, and I took a 2-year advance installment on my retirement, had lots of fun, went to parties, did all sorts of stuff, and then I discovered chaos theory, um, and just it just blew me away. This new science. I thought I got to open up a shop dedicated to this, get the word out because it showed how things self-organize. Gosh, how complex systems self-organize, create structures and form. And I knew about the evils, but not evils so much the uselessness of the state control. Um, with their basic tool of coercion, um, you know, that's what they do. Do this, do what we tell you, or we will somehow damage you, which is a terrible tool. Little kids try it out, criminals try it out, and the state does it. It originally it was really simple. give us your money or we'll chop your head off, or that was it. And then they sophisticated, oh, they take, 10 times as much as they used to take, but they splash a bit back in social services and say, oh, see, you need us now. We've impoverished you so much that we've got to give you some of the money back. What would you do without it? We'll get to that later. So Strange Attractions was fantastic. It changed my life. I mean, I got people coming in from the party scene. There was a sort of psychedelic party scene. And for some reason, they were gravitating to my shop. And Rajaram, one of the pioneers of that scene, the main pioneer of it, came into my shop, and this is when I met him, and he said, "Hey man, I saw that poster on my DMT trip last night," and we were good pals from then on. He eased me into Goa and all sorts of things, and so opening the shop got me back into partying, and because during the '60s and early '70s, my brother and I were catering pop festivals. You couldn't trip. You couldn't do what everybody else was doing there, because you had to feed them, and after the main acts, you had to be, loads of food all ready to go. So I was working at those festivals. So with Strange Attractions, with this shop, I could actually go to the festivals and treat them with all the proper respect they deserved. Um, and thousands, and I mean, the originator of the precursor of this poster sold hundreds of thousands. Um, I licensed the images through the Science Photo Library. They were published in magazines and newspapers around the world. Um, it was a great change from being in the food industry. But unlike the food industry, once people buy your postcards or your poster, they don't come back next week and replace it with another one. They put it up on their wall and they admire it for ages. And I didn't quite realize that it just wasn't going to go on forever. Um, but but it was fantastic, and it was worth every moment of it. And then I licensed the images to other people, closed the shop, and had lots of posters still sold. Um, but the real thing that appealed to me about chaos theory is the self-organization, and how much better we organize from the bottom up than we do from the top down. And I really wanted to get that message out to people. They weren't getting it from looking at my psychedelic posters. Um, so I wrote a book really underlining the futility of trying to determine where the economy is going to go, and say these are how many hours of work, how many hours a week you're allowed to work. These are the standards that cars have to be built to, and you see how they cheat on those standards anyway, um, and really showing how we can manage things, and how few of the things that we really love and treasure in our life came from the government. Um, they were all originated by people, from trains to tubes to planes to biros and microphones and candles. It was all people created all this stuff, not government. But what the real thing governments do is they protect us from other versions of themselves. That's the only essential service we get from government. Um, and the book was republished in 2014. As the state is out of date, we can do it better. So that's still available through Amazon. But that was the republishing of Uncommon Sense. And I think it's more evident than ever today that being protected with an umbrella full of nuclear weapons is not a safe place to be. So it was during Veggie Burger, I heard about a guy who was squatted the would-be McDonald's in Hampstead Heath. And I thought, I've got to go meet this guy. And I didn't suspect that he had a direct line to Colonel Saunders, which is what he told the press. But I went up there, and that's where I met this amazing Phoenix. I really met again later on in further protest movements. Um, and that was, and then yeah, well, Claremont Road was the next place because when I had the shop, the first posters I produced, I made myself, and then I got publishers to do them, and so it was no mess, no fuss for me. They would just give me a little bit of money for every poster they sold, and
Greg, can I just tell a little story there from the McDonald's?
yep,
There's a quick one. Was Nick, who I worked with, who was quite an operator and a character. So we occupied the McDonald's, and they didn't want it to be, the locals didn't want it to be a McDonald's. So we occupied it. We got a lot of support. And Nick told the local newspapers, we've been given permission by this Father McDonald, and apparently McDonald's wanted to create, they wanted to be more environmentally friendly, and they wanted to do veggie burgers and soya milkshakes. And he completely made it up. And who would have, and the McDonald's McLibel trial was going on around the time. Who would have guessed that like 25 years later, McDonald's are actually doing veggie burgers and other things, but they're still not doing good things for the environment. But that was great to meet you then, Greg. Just thought I'd drop that one in. Over.
they were the one last to do it. The one thing that I neglected to mention when I went with the veggie burger is that I came up with that word because there was no word in the language for a vegetarian burger, and veggie was never used as a substitute for veg. Vegetarians were vegetarians, and meat and two veg was the basic diet of the British people. So I had a list. I had green burger, earth burger, sesame burger, veggie burger, um, and they all looked equally strange. And I chose veggie burger, and it got a trademark. It was granted a trademark because it was not considered descriptive, which it seems odd now, but it wasn't at the time. And had I thought of a subsequent, I came up with a trademark for another for another vegetarian burger market, which was the no bull burger. And that's probably what I would have done, and that probably wouldn't have gone into the language. It was a damn sight. It was difficult protecting your trademark, stopping other people from using it because um, that happens a lot. So on food, I won't labor on about macrobiotic diet. I just want to make a couple points about food that people don't always think about in diet. Um, One is our gut flora. Okay, we've discovered or appreciated our gut flora. That's a very recent thing, understanding in the last 10 years or so. And it is amazing just to appreciate them that you can take in, you know, apples and beans, and carrots, or dates, or fungus, all sorts of mushrooms. You can eat goats, you can eat fish. Um, Candy bars, Big Macs, milkshakes, and these gut flora managed to turn all this stuff into fingernails and skin and bones and intestines and blood. Um, well, them and this miracle that we have as a human body changes all this stuff into us. That's poor old panda bear only eats bamboo leaves and turns that into fingernails and hair and all this stuff, which is something to consider how it gets on. Um, but the gut flora lives off of eating the food that we eat. And it's there. And if you've got a good gut flora, it thrives on what you're eating. And people get a bit obsessed with banging it down, swallowing pills and potions. Um, for as if you're going to run out of gut flora if you don't do that. I mean, I love fermented foods. You get a lot of gut flora in a varied diet, or things that change them and tweak them and God knows what. But it's not an essential food stuff itself. But it's essential to appreciate it. And when you're eating, think about being nice to your gut flora, and think about whether you want candy bars or rice or beans or whatever, turned into your body. Um, and the other thing is positive eating. I mean, for me, when Craig introduced me to macrobiotics, it was a slightly slow realization, but my diet became what I ate. and not dictated by what I didn't eat. It wasn't like anything but meat. Um, and people do get a bit obsessed today with, oh, I must avoid gluten, or I must avoid seed oils or salt, and not focusing so much on the positivity of what you eat, because a little bit of any of that stuff isn't going to kill you or damage you. Your gut flora can cope with it. It's when you're sort of deep frying chips every day in some sort of a toxic oil, particularly rapeseed oil, or when you're guzzling down you know ice cream and God knows what, then it's damaging. But it's really focus on the positive, eat good stuff, and if occasionally you want to eat something that's you used to think was poisonous, your body is probably going to cope with little bits of it, um, unless you have allergies, of course. So positive eating is really important and lost on many people. Also, taste your medicine. Your body can make a connection between what you're tasting and what's happening with your body. And herbs and things that you can actually taste, like ginkgo biloba or whatever. It's good to actually empty those capsules out into some water and taste them, so your whole system knows what medicines you're ingesting, and then can maybe call them up later on in your life. So so direct action. I've got lots of direct action.
Oh yeah, lovely.
So here you go. I was on those posters. I had all the odd size posters, thousands of them, and because I now had the proper shape posters being done by poster publishers and sold all over the world. So I thought, oh, I'll take these, and I saw a bit on the news on this road that had been a road that had been squatted entirely in Leytonstone, East London, to prevent 300 dwellings from being destroyed, to cut 3 minutes off the journey into London via the M11. It was something like that.
Mm.
And I thought, oh God, they could use my posters up there, decorate their walls. So I loaded my Saab up with a boot full of these posters and drove out there and discovered this amazing phenomenon. Almost, it was tantamount to when I went to the Stonehenge Free Festival, the last couple of those.
I love that, Greg, the Gaian Temple of the Comet
Yeah,
denominational, all welcome. We had to look through some of Greg's photos of the weekend. This is a
yeah,
classic.
yeah.
It's brilliant. Love it.
I mean, this was the road. There were two different cafes on this road. There was a stage. Um, I took my friend Tony. I went down there just about every weekend. I took my friend Tony Allen there. He said, "There's more art here than there was at the Edinburgh Festival he'd just come down from." I took my father down there, and he said, "This reminds me of when I was a child in Bridgeville, Pennsylvania, and all the kids, there were hardly any cars, and everybody hung out in each other's gardens. Everybody knew each other and played in the street, and it was such a different phenomenon." He's all,
Um,
yep,
that was absolutely great. One of the things, Reclaim the Streets came out of Claremont Road and the Rainbow Centre in Kentish Town, but bringing the inside outside, bringing, sofas and art and sculptures inside. The bottom of that picture says, rust in peace car, really,
yep.
really important what happened there, really, spread around the world. Oh, quick plug, 17th of May, 30th anniversary, Reclaim the Streets. There's details on the WhatsApp and other things. I'll try and put a link in here. 17th of May, Reclaim the Streets, 30th anniversary. See you on the streets. I'll put a Telegram link in the chat. Over. Carry on, Greg.
Okay, so it's more to direct action. This is a classic photo from Trafalgar Square. Uh,
Mm.
they want to fight, we want to dance, and this was the fallback position in a protest, and it was a fantastic fallback position because that's a long story anyway. Um, so this is Newbury. This is a buried car at the Newbury protest group action. Um, this is Brickhenge, one of the art installations at Claremont Road. Some of these things you could have put sold to an art gallery on a Banksy. There's just so much stuff there. Um, and there's the guy in Temple of the Interdenominational, all welcome, showtimes now, minister the very reverend you. There's a little anarchy sign at the top and other stuff. This is called Piss Tuesday on Claremont Road. It was one of the early evictions. Piss Tuesday because one of the guys standing atop a tower had to relieve himself, and there was no way for his urine to go but down, and there happened to be a policeman's helmet underneath, which got soiled by it, so he might have been arrested. Um, this is on the final eviction day at Claremont Road. These are people hung up on the rooftops. Old Mick was up here. He was threatening to hang himself if they came in. Um, and That's Dolly's Tower, where the last person was plucked after 5 days of evicting this one street. The last protester was plucked off the top of Dolly's Tower when he fell asleep, and they got him. Um,
Phil, lovely man.
and that's me getting taken out by 4 sheriff's officers on the first day. They were trying to push me, and I wouldn't let them, which was the combative state. And then they said they're gonna have to lift me. At that point, I have to show them you like grab here, you grab here, you grab here, and be very compliant on how to carry a wheelchair, giving them the lessons. Um, okay, and that's one of my favorites. This was from the Islington protest, and this was much more modern days coming into on the COVID and lockdown protests. As you recall, Greta Thunberg's thing was, "You're stealing my future." And I said, "You're stealing my fucking present, man." Locking people down in their homes and so on and so forth. Um, and then and then some other Big Pharma loves you. We were out in front of BBC House, and that was my banner for that. Um, so there we are with the beautiful Anna sun gazing at this demo and every chance we get, and which takes us to the sun. And Uncommon Sense was really showing us um, the futility of top-down coercive state government. It was very sort of temporal of this planet stuff. And it was great writing books and not buying and selling stuff, but ideas, transmitting ideas. And I'd recognized on my very first acid trip in 1966 that the sun was a living entity, that there's something going on there. And I never really did anything with that other than treasure it and have that special relationship with the sun in all the following years. But in the coming up to 2000, first sunrise of 2000 actually is on beach in Goa, I realized my next book would be on the sun, because I gazed into it on that first acid trip. I gazed into it on this beach in Goa, and that's when I realized I would write a book about it. And I couldn't believe how much I understood as I looked into the the science of it as well. But in the past, of course, everywhere you went in the world, people knew that the sun was an entity to be worshipped like a god, a very powerful, important figure in our lives, often the prime deity. And this is an illustration of that. And then Christianity came along, and suddenly, well, the Abrahamic religions, um, worshiping the sun, you get burned at the stake. It was the worst thing you could do. It was the ultimate opposition. And, generation after generation, um, this idea was suppressed. And we now look on the sun as if it's some accidental light bulb in the sky that just happens to hold all the planets together and shower us with the light of life, and that all the other stars in the heavens are also sort of accidental light bulbs. Um, and yeah, the church kind of eclipsed the sun from our light. And we all know now that the sun is one of the stars in the heavens. And it seems kind of logical, you got all those lights way far away, and if the sun was that much further away, it would look like a star. The first guy to realize that, Giordano Bruno,
Mhm.
was burned at the stake. Um, he was inspired by Copernicus. He came behind Galileo, but Copernicus and Galileo recognized that the Earth rotated the sun and the planets rotated the sun. But both of them still thought the entire universe rotated around our sun. So Bruno was absolutely extraordinary um, to perceive what we now take as kind of obvious. And he also recognized that stars were living entities.
Mm.
He supposed that most of them had planets around them, which we now are finding out to be true, and that many of those planets would have life of some sort on them, which was an extraordinary thing to believe. But now we know, let's see if I got that our sun is a lot more complex than an accidental light bulb in the sky. And 6 months after I wrote my book on the sun, um, NASA discovered something called a magnetic portal, which connects the sun to the Earth every 8 minutes. It comes out of the Earth's corona. It's a diameter of the Earth. It joins the other half comes out of the sun's corona, and which are all moving, circulating things, but these are energetic fields, so they're not stuck to the Earth, to matter. And these two ends join up, and according to NASA, we've got 4 satellites. We're looking at it. Tons of high energy particles, which weigh next to nothing. So it's a lot. Go back and forth in that brief connection, and then it goes back again. Um, they've since then found other electromagnetic connections from sun to Earth. They're very hard to see because to perceive because they're invisible, but they see connections between galaxies as well. And I suggest that there are also connections between stars within galaxies. But on the sun, on the surface of the sun, you've got these 4 sunspots, solar flares, coronal mass ejections, and coronal filaments. Um, Coronal mass ejections are the ones that, I mean, if you see the solar flare there, you see the approximate size of Earth on it. It's kind of small Earth compared to a solar flare. A coronal mass ejection is like, thousands of flares altogether. And those are the ones that could hit a part of Earth while the Earth is rotating and could take out the electricity, cables, supplies, generators, everything. It could darken out so we got a few scare stories about that, and it could be scary. It doesn't hurt people or anything else. In 1858, there was the Carrington event, such a flare. You could read newspapers at night, in the middle of the night, in the street in Cuba. Um, but it was just a nice thing in the sky, and the telegraph stations caught fire and some ignited because the wires going through them. But that's those 4 phenomena of the solar on the sun's surface. Solar scientists believe they're all controlled by the sun's corona. The sun's corona manages them. They see the coordination between them. The sun's corona is the most mysterious aspect of the sun. It's the most inexplicable aspect of the sun, according to solar scientists. But yet, it's the major feature. There's a mystery of why it is hotter than the surface. It shouldn't be. Um, and yet, for me, in this living entity, that's obviously the mind of the sun. Like our mind is an invisible field around us. We don't kind of see it. And I see the corona as being the visible mind of the sun, which you only see in a total solar eclipse. The only time you see it, which is why scientists and party goers, festival goers, are in awe when you see that corona of the sun. And people don't really know why they're in awe, but I do, because you're seeing the mind of the sun. And I could go on for hours about the sun, but I won't. I'll get some, and I'm gonna. But this is a picture of the sun's corona, which is not just the visible light, but the other invisible light. I haven't got the because we only see a tiny spectrum of the spectrum of light, and that is the corona of the sun. And that's the sun's corona, and you just hey, where have we gone?
It's incredible, Greg.
Yeah.
Deep
And it's
thinking.
extraordinary being, and it's changing its shape continually. Um, it's the solar wind that comes off of that carries particles from the corona. When they interface with the poles of Earth's magnetic field, you get these dancing lights around the Arctic, and the Antarctic. Um, these dancing lights, when the two magnetic fields connect, the sun with the Earth. The same happens on Jupiter. Jupiter has auroras at its poles. So I wrote a book on the sun, um, and I've discovered so much in writing the book, particularly about light and the nature of light. And something to remember, I've got to wrap up soon, but when you're stargazing, which is, if you ever get a chance, it's the most wonderful thing, looking up at a dark night full of stars, which used to be the only nighttime entertainment, other than sort of dancing and stuff. Um, and when you're looking at Sirius, for instance, as you're looking at it, there were thousands of photons coming into the back of your eyeball that originated on Sirius. You look at a tree, you're seeing light telling us about what's on the tree. You look at stars, you are getting the actual vibrations from those stars coming into the back of your eyeball. And if you learn, or you never understand quantum mechanics, but we do know that light travel, and when you travel at the speed of light, time is suspended. There is no time. If you go faster than the speed of light, you go backwards in time. But at the speed of light, there is no time. The photon is always in the now. It's always experiencing the place it's in at the same time and sequentially. So we can't get our heads around that. Um, but the photon itself, in the 8 years of our time that it's coming from Sirius, hasn't lost any of its energy. Traveling all that distance, it's exactly the same photon that came off. And yeah, that nursery rhyme um, is what is it? Well, people talk about wishing upon a star. You send a wish to the star. Maybe something is going through it. That nursery rhyme and how I wonder what you are. And so let's wonder about stars and give some time to the
Mm.
sun and appreciate it. Because most people spend more time thinking about sun lotions and sunglasses than they do about the most important thing in our life. So embrace it. And that's enough. That's
Brilliant.
enough.
Absolutely brilliant. That sparks me to something that somebody told me this week, that some of the ancient Druid knowledge was passed down to people in rhymes, and we have some of that ancient knowledge a bit in nursery rhymes and things. And like you say, wishing on stars. Absolutely brilliant, Greg. What a 50-year history tour, and thank you for being an incredible pioneer of food, direct action, consciousness, and thinking.
Okay. Hey, Greg, thank you. That was a really fascinating whistle stop talk, but lots of really interesting things. My question to you is around the beginning of the talk and the kind of the scene, the counterculture scene in the 60s. Was there a kind of optimistic naivety? People didn't have tech. How did people sort of like know things? How did they find stuff out? And what was the general vibe like without, smartphones, instant access to information?
LSD was accessed as a whole trove of information that isn't on video or in books. And there is literature. I mean, there are books you can buy. You can actually. I still have a book on psychedelics that was published in the early 70s, and we had Opening the Doors of Perception by Huxley. So there were some people who knew about these things, and because LSD flooded the scene when it was out. And I mean, one of the railway porters from Paddington Station used to come down to the restaurant and eat macrobiotic foods there. And I don't know what else he got from there, but he went out and he opened London's first massage school. afterwards. You know, a lot of people's lives changed, and they became acupuncturists or natural healers or opened up shops selling natural foods. It's and we had Seed Magazine. Uh, you know, we were way ahead of the march on the dangers of drinking too much milk. My brother wrote a classic article on the dangers of using too much soap and hair shampoo because we've got, you know, wonderful colonies, if we're healthy, on our skin and our hair that are there to protect us. And suddenly you strip them all away and you start to lose it. We knew about aluminium and asbestos. Some of these things actually, people knew about asbestos back in the 20s and 30s, and just it kept getting suppressed by the industry, that information. Um, Doctors used to, we weren't the first to talk about tobacco, but doctors used to recommend different brands of tobacco for your sore throat.
How far we have come.
I mean, there's even, I mean, Ronald Reagan is one of them. Ronald Reagan stars in a cigarette advert or something.
Why do you think people stopped revering the sun? You mentioned that in your son of
Well,
God
you know,
book.
when you burn enough people to death for something, other people don't go near it, and it gets lost from the knowledge base. Um, it really was. It was a more heinous crime than murder to worship the sun. You know, according to, you know, Christianity, you know, you wouldn't get forgiveness for it, and it's also the scientific community, I think, is scared to think about it, and is also so influenced by the, you know, I think, therefore I am doctrine, and they cannot imagine um, animals, you know, dogs thinking, um, or the sun thinking. It's only us with all that particular configuration in our brains enables self-awareness and thought, you know. And if
Very human centric.
yeah, even
Looking at
when
things.
now we know about trees and the the wood wide web, and it's hard to deny some sort of consciousness and intelligence. I mean, I see it in absolutely everything, but you know, science is having a really hard time holding on to humans as being the only self-aware, conscious, you know, slime molds going on and all sorts of.
Mushrooms are 3 miles wide underground, and
Yeah.
countercultures.
So, hey, Greg. Yeah, I've been really interested in your book for a long time, and I guess I was wondering any sufficiently complicated electromagnetic system can contain consciousness. That seems to be the thing. I guess the question is, I would say, is like, is there a way of testing for consciousness? Maybe that's my question.
Well, the earliest quantum physicist, Bohm, had a plasma soup of electrons that he'd created somehow at the Lawrence Livermore Laboratory in Berkeley, and he said these electron soup was behaving as if it was a conscious entity at that fundamental level. I mean, my belief is, and I came to this through. It was surprising to me, but through writing the book, having recognized the consciousness in the sun, then you recognize, well, the sun is the hydrogen and helium atoms that somehow cohered into making this incredible device. There's got to be consciousness there as well, and I'm really was taken with Zoroastrianism, which recognizes light as the ultimate deity. And they recognized that light wasn't just the visible light spectrum from the names that you can tell from the names they gave it. And that electromagnetic spectrum, it's everywhere. It's in the inside an atom. It's part of the force that's electromagnetic force that's holding an atom together.
So I'm wondering if that means that essentially electromagnetism is like the carrier for consciousness, like the photon is the you know, could photons be the carrier for conscious awareness? I just wanted to like say, I just had this, I know Phoenix, you're going to complain, but I had this experience when I was at your birthday party, Phoenix. where I was like dancing to Shiva, and then I had this message that came to me, and it was something like, if you can see it, it weighs, and if you can't see it, you're in it, which was something like to do with you know, photons and gravity and consciousness are all somehow entangled. I think that was what Shiva was trying to tell me, although I still haven't quite worked out what it means.
Okay, we're getting deep and deeper tonight.
There was a book that switched a lot of people on, and I used to know the guy that wrote it. It was called The Tao of Physics. I should think that Greg knows it. Made a lot of difference to a lot of people who just didn't realize that the potential of physics and what it really is. Anyway, it was called The Tao of Physics. It was a guy called Fritjof Capra.
Yeah. No, that was an extraordinary book, and he used one of my fractals for the cover of another book of his as well. But yeah, it's quite spooky stuff.
We need to know more about this. We need to douse ourselves in the mystery of the universe in a way that's beyond our understanding still.
Yeah, it's a friend of mine, Robert Temple, wrote a fantastic book on plasmas. And again, it's too much to cover in my talk, but 99% of the universe is in the state of plasma. We know solid, liquid, and gas, but plasma, which is electricity, and which is the sun, and which is the larger gaseous planets, it's the stuff of the universe, and it's electromagnetic fields, highly conducive to electromagnetic fields, and it's really, you need to read a book about it to understand how extraordinarily amazing plasma is. You get ball lightning. That you know, you occasionally see manifestations on Earth, but
Yeah, ball lightning that comes into people's houses and then comes in the window, leaves by the door.
yeah, or it's gone into ships, it's gone into airplanes and gone down the center of the airplane, and you know, nobody knows what's going on there.
Okay, thanks ever so much, Greg. It's great to know that you're alive and kicking still. In the 1970s, I was a member of a workers' co-op that was one of your customers at Harmony Foods in
Oh,
Birmingham.
there you go. Thank you for your business.
Yeah, I'm afraid to say we perceived you as the hip capitalists at the time, but
Yeah,
there we go. I'm all in favour of organising from the bottom up, but what I'm aware of is that there's a desperate shortage of people who are actually prepared to step up and take on those kind of organising roles in social enterprises and other, you know, organisations that actually do things other than just protesting. So one of my hobby horses is that the hippies were right all along. They just needed to be a bit more organised, perhaps invoking a bit more of their left brains, you know, understanding spreadsheets and things like that. So I'm wondering if you've got any comments on that, as somebody who was obviously very organised.
one of the drivers of change, I mean, to be sort of blunt about it, was drugs. It really helped to get your synapses rewired from such a gray, organized, you know, flatland world to being in touch with trees and birds and food, and you know, it was a whole different level of consciousness, and it kind of got buried, you know, and you know, the food kept on. I mean, what we were doing kept on growing and growing and growing. So, so hip capitalism worked on that. And, you know, we always used to say, oh, we know we'll know we've succeeded when the multinational takes us over. And you have innovators and you have entrepreneurs, and then you have other people who can get your product or get a product in every airplane kiosk in the world. That's a level of organization which innovators are. I mean, Richard Branson did a damn good job of it. You know, starting with a phone box. His phone box outside his bedroom was his office phone number, and but it's a tough one to do. But again, as I said, we're here at the very beginning when I talked about how many people know acupuncturists and yoga teachers, and you don't need a central government for that. You just need lots of people catching on.
I thought it was interesting the questioner saying about the left brain and right brain, because I feel like that's very. I mean, I still don't know if that's really scientifically borne out, but I definitely feel that there's something to do with different kinds of modes of consciousness, and the fact that there are too many people who are dreamers in the progressive movement, and not enough organizers, and I agree with that. And I think the thing is, organizers tend to get very well paid, and it's hard to lure them out of that lifestyle once they get well paid to take out.
Well, could be. I've been organising for years. I don't get well paid. We do it for the love and for the earth and the environment. Diane, thanks for that, Doc.
Greg, you just mentioned we were there at the very beginning. That's the whole point. It's kind of a pendulum going backwards and forwards, or a circular movement. There is actually a movement going on. The movement that was happening, that you and me too, actually, we were part of in the 60s, that was all cramped down. I mean, it went with Vietnam being exposed and the technical details. You got movies and newspapers, and the amount of communication going on, there was loads of it. A lot of it wasn't, we didn't have all the electrical stuff in those days. It was done by word of mouth. The first Glastonbury, for example, was just all word of mouth. And that was a sign of what was going on. But now we've gone through all the repression that happened. We had Thatcher and Reagan, who made us focus on money, and therefore money and business and corporations took over for all the time in between. But right now, there's been a movement going on that I've been able to see for the last 4 or 5 years, and it is absolutely huge. The number of people who are interested in an alternative way of living, the number of people, like you say, they want to do yoga, they want macrobiotic, they want vegan food, blah, 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 all the good things that are happening all over the place. But therefore, that gives us the choice. What you were saying about diet, I could relate the whole thing in a diet way on the level of bamboo. You mentioned animals that eat only bamboo, so they haven't got that choice. For me, the human condition is the fact that we do have the choice, and our education, we haven't been educated enough. And we, the elders, if we make a space for the elders, the ones who were around last time around, and we learned that actually if we can take control of our own mind and focus only on the positive, like we can choose not to eat McDonald's or to only eat really lovely beans and things like that, and we can also choose how we think. If we choose to think properly, consciousness comes into it, is the next thing. And there's a scientific movement that the Scientific and Medical Network I'm part of. They actually are working out ways to kind of prove the left brain and the right brain and all that sort of stuff. And so that movement is also happening. And this year especially, it's the year of the snake in Chinese stuff. And it sheds all its old beliefs and stuff like that and stands up and makes another move. The last time this happened, it's a wood snake, was 1965. So the circular, the pendulum swinging, the backwards and forwards, the movement going on is absolutely enormous. For me, magic's happening on a pretty much daily basis, where you see everything just slip into place, and the number of people who are ready to believe the alternative, for me, the better way of being, is amazing. So just before I came here, for example, what I was watching Marianne Williamson. I don't know if that means anything, or if you've heard of her. She ran for president in the States, but she was actually saying the same sort of stuff. I only saw the beginning of it because I had to come to here. But we need to take hold of our own brains, basically. We can choose, do we want to moan or do we want to be positive? I'll stop talking.
Positive mental attitude. I try and remind myself of that.
21 seconds before anyone. I've just got the little picture of an electromagnetic field. If you could, if you could actually see the electromagnetic fields coming off of things, I will do share here. And
because that electromagnetic field, there's only one of us here. There's one piece of energy, and it is us.
Nice.
Okay. Here we go.
And as they get closer to you, they start to curve away and they turn so that they zoom off into the distance, and then they bend back and they go diving back down. But you're not seeing just one of these. You see this happening all around you.
There you go.
Field lines bursting out
There you go, electromagnetic fields.
Wow.
Wow.
Wow, nice. Okay,
Right. The Sams family are great Celts, right? And what I mean by that is how we are is quite simple. Father, Son, and Mother Earth, right? We're pagans, right? And the Celts have had the boot on the foot, on our neck, the boot on our neck for 2,000 years. We're rising. The giant is beginning to awaken. The Celtic giant, the Celtic nation is beginning to awaken. If you look into the Sams family, right, they're actually a functional family. They're full of love. And I know, and I'm part of the Sams family, and what I've learned from the Sams family is amazing, right? 90% of the books are about dysfunctional families, written on dysfunctional families, right? There's hardly any books written on functional families, what's successful, what works. If you know the Sams family, you know they're fucking giants. They're great people. They're visionaries, they're creators, and they're love, basically. Right. Phoenix, I know you since the McDonald's day with Fraser Clark. Right.
Big up the old M11 crew. Yep. Big
Yeah.
up Martin and all the tree possessors.
And Greg, what a warrior. A Newbury, a M11, Dead Woman's Bottom. Greg was always there. Right. He's one of the biggest men I've ever met. He's got more balls than fucking most people. And what, honestly, what can I say? You know, I tell you, I'm going to leave you with this, right? There's two camps here. There's people that believe in the climate shit, and there's people that don't, right? The sun has a huge effect on the climate, our climate. It always has done. If you look at the science, right? The whole climate thing, the whole XR is controlled opposition. I'm really, really sorry, but that's the way it is.
Thank you for your contribution, Martin, and many perspectives on things. That's good. And yes, the sun has affected a lot of solar cycles things for a while. Over to one of the other giants, Craig Sams there. Craig, thank you very much for coming to support the family, Sams. Craig, I love that poster from the, you have to unmute, that's just the arms dealer poster from the Seed magazine, was it? Over, Craig.
Yeah, I gave you a link to it, but I'm not sure that it's actually there, but I'm sure I can get it to you, or Gregory can. Just commenting on the comments. One was, how did we communicate when we didn't have texting? Well, we had venues like the UFO Club, Middle Earth, and Glastonbury, and we were doing food at the UFO Club and at Glastonbury, and people would come to the restaurant and learn about the importance of diet and eat the food and experience it directly. As far as the guy, I think he's signed off, who thought we were hippie capitalists when his co-op came to buy from us. Mickey Farron, who was involved with Motorhead and what was the other name? Anyway, a band who played at the UFO Club occasionally, called us the brown rice barons, because if you bought brown rice, it didn't matter what it said on the package. The original source of it was Harmony Foods. And the final point really is when sun worship got replaced by God worship, there was an element of a transition from matriarchy to patriarchy, but we kept the sun as the halo that you saw around the heads of saints. So we still we just superimposed a man's head on the sun. That gave it a halo, and that was kept the sun worshippers in hand, so to speak. That's me done. I thought it was a great session.
Good.
Brilliant. And thanks for both the Brother Sam's pioneering work. I think Craig was part of the Soil Association, and you, how, coming to you, Tim, in a sec, just how things have really transformed. What Greg said at the beginning, how, you know, from brown rice to yoga, you know, is now more mainstream. All these things that were alternative back in '68, you guys have helped to, it's now, you know, much more mainstream, everything from yoga to veganism.
I just want to say really huge thanks for such a wide-ranging sort of thought form. You know, from what we eat to direct action to the stars, looking at the stars. And I remember at the time, you know, the big argument being that if we changed with our food, you know, that from our very root of our being, it would change our attitudes and our relationships to each other. And that was just revolutionary, just thinking that food has such a potential. And everything you've talked about has potential for change. But the thing I wanted to comment on about, well, just too quickly, just to add into the ways in which we communicated in the 60s, it was also by the bookshops like Compendium in Camden Town, by the underground newspapers like International Times and Oz, by books that were written by numerous people. And I remember in the 60s, it was kind of a lot of, there weren't so many places to go. There were the clubs, which people have mentioned, but there was a lot of just sitting around all night, smoking or whatever, listening to Dylan records and Beatle records and all of the music as well. You know, the music was a fantastic communicator on a kind of feeling level of the culture. And everyone was just dying for the next kind of twist and turn. And that book, Counterculture by Theodore Roszak, was another sort of little moment. There were so many moments. Well, anyway, I won't go on about all that. But I just want to say about hippies sort of being disorganized and it being sort of powered by drugs. I think there were other elements that were going on, and the idea of co-ops was an important one, which did begin to emerge. But I think where the hippies kind of missed a trick was the emergence, the re-emergence, should I say, of the commons movement. Because the commons movement, which was articulated by Ellen Ostrom in particular, when she won a Nobel Prize for it, Peace Prize, I think it was, has been going for centuries. In England, it's known as the kind of, you know, offshoot of the feudal system, but it's actually existed in African countries, in Asia and so forth. It's a worldwide movement. I don't know if you can see this, but The Wealth of the Commons by David Bollier and Silke Helfrich is a wonderful, is a compendium of commons going throughout the world. It's, although they more or less edited this particular book, they wrote another book. They wrote 3 patterns of commoning. These are all free. You can download them on the net. And this is the last one, which is more a book actually written by them, more authored, but which is a wonderful discussion because they had such brilliant. Silke Helfrich unfortunately died in about 2019. She was a wonderful spirit. But you can find out Bollier, David lives in the States, davidbollier.org. He writes a lot about the commons and the practice of being a commoner. It has an urban thing. It's not just, originally people think the commons is about land and water and lakes, but it's also about urban things. It's very, very strong in France, in Paris, for example, in Berlin, all over the place, in the States too. So I just say that there is a way to self-organize, and it's got a long.
Do you have anything to say about food co-ops, I suppose, and cooperatives in general? Do you see them as state-related, or do you see them as, you know, corporations, or do you see them as an expression of, you know, basically, how do you feel about co-ops?
I feel about human enterprise, and I believe in free enterprise, that there should be no regulation whatsoever on how people deal with each other, how they exchange goods or articles. And, you know, at the moment, you have this so much regulation on how we do it, and you've got to keep track of everything so you can pay the right taxes on it. And yeah, I think co-ops are great. I mean, we had a lot of people would come to us at Harmony Foods, and they'd put 100-weight sacks of things and, you know, 5 liters of tamari and take them back to Wales. It's an admirable thing to do. but putting it in the package and putting your label on it and selling it and distributing it is also an admirable thing to do, as long as you've got what you say is on the packet is in it, and you're not pretending it's great and it's
I
not.
think that's the difficulty, which comes down to the idea that without some form of regulation, there's going to be a lot of abuse and exploitation. So I do understand that, but how do you administer that kind of, you talk about the negativity of control, but without some kind of some kind of backstop to prevent abuse by one individual to another individual. You need a society, you need organization. It's not just all about the rugged individualist, sort of what's her name? What's her
Ayn
name?
Rand.
Anyway,
Ayn
yeah,
Rand.
Ayn Rand, I'm thinking of. Yeah.
I'm going to answer the question because we're running out of time. And I say,
Great.
it is those very controls to keep us safe that are the reason that we have McDonald's and fried chicken joints and fast food rubbish proliferating, because they can comply with the rules that are set. And inevitably, when you've got somebody who can force people to do stuff, the multinational corporations and food producers will start handling the levers of it. We have the Soil Association. My brother was chairman of the Soil Association for around 10 years, and they make sure that the stuff, if it says it's organic on the packet with their symbol, that's the case. Craig's got his hand up.
Just two quick points.
Mhm.
Gregory made my point for me, which is that you don't need the government to protect organic. You've got reputable independent bodies, the Soil Association being the main one, that guarantee that you get what you're claiming. And that's why some of the things that are coming out, like agroecological and regenerative, haven't quite got to that point yet.
Yes, the regulation idea. So obviously, as I didn't know about the connection to the Soil Association, so that would be one example of a verification organization to prevent things being, as you say, mislabeled, as it were. So I think that's getting at that.
Humans are very good at doing that, at providing their own needs when somebody else isn't pushing it down their throats.
Okay. One of the, I think it's been chatting in other webinars, when there's been disasters, humans are some of the best at self-organizing and getting together. You see with Occupy Sandy and things, and self-organizations. I've got one last question here for Greg. We're going to roll on another 5 minutes or so. Might lead to it. There's a speaker we've got offering to come at some point later on who thinks a bit about some of this stuff. But I know from some of your writings, Craig, we're getting a bit deeper tonight on things. But you've written about, what do you think of the various SETI projects underway that's searching for evidence of life somewhere else in the universe? I know we've got Dr. Stephen Greer wants to come on at some point as a webinar. But what do you think of that, Greg? This last question, and then after that, you sum up whatever you want to say at the end. And thank you so much.
After recognizing the sun was a living entity in 1966, nothing I ever came across did anything but reinforce that recognition. But you couldn't mention it. People would think you were absolutely fucking nuts if you suggested the sun was a living entity. And the only time I couldn't restrain myself from bringing it up was when people are talking about SETI. And I just have to say, listen, we're out there looking for something that's kind of like us and maybe has 3 eyes and 5 legs, that's intelligent, and yet here's the biggest intelligence in the fucking neighborhood is, we see it every day. Comes up in the morning, goes down at night, and they don't recognize that that's intelligence. And they're sending CDs out in capsules to space, thinking other people are going to figure it out. And it's sad. So yeah, SETI should really say, search for something kind of like us.
Brilliant. Okay, yeah, many of the ancient cultures, from Amaterasu, the goddess of the sun in Japan, to many others, attributed.
Carl was on a great podcast I just looked at a couple of days ago, of the people who've had long extended DMT experiences, and they're talking about the machine elves or the entities that they meet that are they're kind of just coming to the conclusion or admitting to the conclusion that these are real entities. And it's like you've got intergalactic travel, but this is actually traveling and meeting different species and having conversation of entities that maybe don't have a physical body.
There's obviously a lot of research going on with things like SETI to look outwards, but what about looking inwards? And now we've got DMT extended, which is kind of a form of technology. So if you think about ayahuasca, that's about 20% DMT. So now we can have 100% DMT for as long as we want. And I think going in intentionally looking for this intelligence is a really worthy cause. And we're talking to SETI about this kind of internal search rather than an external search. And somebody just donated 300 million to SETI. Imagine being that wealthy that you just give 300 million to SETI. But yeah, wow. So we're looking inwards instead of outwards.
Nice. Very, very good point. Inner worlds or outer worlds. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll come over to Gregory there for a sum up. Anything you want to say at the end? We'll stop the recording. We will leave this Zoom on for another 15 minutes. If you've got to go for tea or whatever, go. If you want to chat and further anything on, you can. Over to Gregory. Thank you very much, my old friend, for coming. Thank you for all your work through all the decades since the 60s. Pioneers like yourself and Linda have been on the forefront of evolutionary change. Thank you for all you've been doing. Over to you for the final words. Over.
Pleasure to be here. And final word of life is an absolutely beautiful gift. And it is channeling the energy of sunlight. I mean, that's the source of all the energy that we use. So we are a manifestation of that energy. And we should honor it, because everything we know about light is it gives us, you see things in the light of something, you see the light, enlightenment. It's always associated with knowledge and gift. So shine the light, shine the good light.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, I'll stop it there. Thank you very much.